You won't believe what happened when Karen from the HOA tried to tell me how to cook my barbecue. I was minding my own business, grilling some ribs on a sunny Saturday afternoon, when out of nowhere, Karen, one of those HOA neighbors who loves to enforce rules, told me my barbecue smell was ruining her weekend. You think I backed down? Oh no. Instead, I did something that left her speechless, shocked, and absolutely furious. I cooked a 100-pound turkey on her lawn. Yeah, you heard me right. I took my barbecue game to the next level, and it was more than just about cooking. It was about making a statement. This story will leave you laughing, cringing, and probably thinking twice about crossing a neighbor like me again. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. It all started on a beautiful spring day in the quiet, suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Hills. The kind of place where everyone keeps to themselves, but the HOA is always lurking, looking for ways to keep the peace by imposing the strictest of rules. You know the type. No lawns over 6 inches tall, no cars parked overnight in driveways, and certainly no excessive barbecue smells drifting through the air. I mean, who wouldn't want to live in a place like that, right? Now, for me, weekends are all about one thing: barbecue. I've been perfecting my grilling skills for years. Smoking meat, slow-cooking ribs, searing steaks, it's my passion. There's something about the smell of smoke wafting through the air, the sizzle of food hitting the grill, that just makes the weekend feel like heaven. But, as many grillers know, there's always one person who has a problem with the smell, Karen. Karen, oh Karen, where do I even begin? If you've ever had the pleasure, or should I say, the misfortune, of encountering one of those complain about everything neighbors, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. She's the one who calls the HOA whenever someone dares to leave a leaf on their lawn for more than 24 hours. She's the one who makes everyone's life a little more miserable by nitpicking every little detail. So when I heard her voice at my fence that afternoon, I knew trouble was on the horizon. I was just getting the ribs on the grill, the smoke starting to rise in that perfect spiraling dance, when Karen marched up to my yard. She was holding a clipboard, of course, and had that stern expression on her face that screamed, "I'm about to ruin your day." "Hey, Mike," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I wanted to talk to you about the barbecue. It's a bit much." I raised an eyebrow, wiping my hands on a rag. "The barbecue?" I asked, my eyes scanning the grill. "It's just some ribs. You know, cooking for the family." Karen folded her arms, eyes narrowed. "Yeah, well, the smell is a bit overwhelming. I've received complaints. Some people in the neighborhood are sensitive to that kind of thing. Maybe you could tone it down." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, who could possibly be sensitive to the smell of barbecue on a sunny Saturday afternoon? I looked around at my neighbors' yards. Everyone else was either mowing their lawns, lounging by the pool, or grilling themselves. It was the perfect day to cook out. "Karen, I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's barbecue. It's part of the weekend vibe around here. I'm not breaking any rules." Her lips curled into that smug smile I'd seen a million times before. "Actually, you might want to check the HOA rules. We have a section in the community guidelines that prohibits, and I quote, excessive outdoor cooking odors. I'm going to have to file a complaint if this continues." I stood there, staring at her in disbelief. Excessive outdoor cooking odors? This was insane. This was barbecue, not a toxic chemical spill. But Karen didn't seem like the kind of person who cared about reason or common sense. She only cared about her rules. "Well, Karen," I said, taking a deep breath, "I've got a lot of meat to cook today. So if you don't mind, I'll get back to it. Hope you enjoy the smell." I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Oh, was I wrong? The next day, I received an official notice from the HOA in my mailbox. The letter was short but firm. "Due to a complaint regarding the excessive smell of barbecue smoke emanating from your property, you are required to refrain from outdoor grilling until further notice. Failure to comply may result in fines." I had to read it twice. Was this a joke? Apparently, Karen had taken it a step further and made it official, an official HOA complaint. I couldn't believe it. This woman, this self-appointed barbecue police, had actually taken the time to call the HOA about a little grill smoke. At first, I was angry. Furious, even. How could she do this? Why couldn't she just mind her own business and enjoy her day like everyone else? But then, something strange happened. As the anger simmered, a small, devious smile crept across my face. If she wanted to play this game, I would play it, but I wasn't going to back down. The next weekend, I decided to take things up a notch. What better way to teach Karen a lesson than to take her complaint and blow it up to a scale she would never forget? I started with a simple thought. What would really get under her skin? And then it hit me. What if I cooked something so big, so ridiculously aromatic, that there was no way she could avoid the smell? A 100-pound turkey. I had always wanted to cook one, but it's not something you just throw on the grill for a small gathering. But now, with Karen pushing my buttons, I saw this as the perfect opportunity. This would be no ordinary barbecue. This would be a spectacle. So I ordered the turkey, a 100-pound behemoth. It wasn't cheap, but the idea of roasting that bird on her lawn, the aroma wafting through the air, was worth every penny. The plan was simple, the biggest barbecue of my life, right there, in front of her house. When the day finally came, I woke up early. I needed to prepare. I had the turkey, my smoker, and an arsenal of spices ready to go. It was time to cook the most absurdly large turkey ever seen in Oakwood Hills. I wheeled the smoker to the edge of my yard, right near the fence that separated Karen's lawn from mine. She would be getting a front row seat to the chaos. My wife and kids were inside, watching eagerly from the window. And then I went to work. The turkey, seasoned to perfection, was carefully placed in the smoker. The smell started to drift into the air, a thick, irresistible cloud of savory goodness. There was no way anyone would miss it. Karen would get the message loud and clear. As the hours passed, the turkey roasted in all its glory. The smell grew stronger, filling the neighborhood with a mouth-watering aroma. I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction every time a neighbor walked by, pausing to take a deep breath of the heavenly scent. The aroma of the turkey had reached a level that was impossible to ignore. By now, the entire street smelled like a heavenly feast, and I could see people peeking through their windows or walking by, glancing at the enormous smoker in my yard. I felt a surge of satisfaction. This wasn't just about barbecue anymore. It was about sending a message to Karen, to the HOA, to anyone who thought they could dictate what people could or couldn't do in their own homes. The sun was starting to dip low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the neighborhood. The turkey was nearing its peak, the skin crisping up perfectly. I had set up an entire barbecue station outside, complete with side dishes and everything a proper feast would need. It wasn't just a turkey on the grill now. It was a full-blown banquet for anyone who dared to come near. And then came Karen. I could see her walking up the street, her usual rigid posture and arms crossed in that judgmental way she always carried herself. As she neared my property, she paused, took a deep breath, and I could see her nostrils flare. She didn't even need to say anything. It was clear she was furious. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, a small group of neighbors had gathered, and they all stood there watching the spectacle unfold. It felt almost like a showdown. Karen marched right up to my front door. Her eyes narrowed and her mouth set in a hard line. "Mike," she said, her voice icy. "This is unacceptable. What do you think you're doing?" I stood up from the grill, wiping my hands with a towel, trying to keep the grin off my face. "I'm cooking a turkey, Karen. What does it look like I'm doing?" Her face turned crimson, and she took a few steps closer, like she was about to explode. "You're making a mockery of the HOA rules. This is exactly what I warned you about. Excessive cooking odors," she said, the words dripping with disdain. I looked at the group of neighbors standing behind her. Most of them were giving me nervous glances, unsure whether they should side with Karen or just walk away from the madness. I figured this was the moment to really drive my point home. "Well, Karen," I said, my tone casual but dripping with a little too much sweetness, "if you have a problem with my barbecue, you could always come over and join me. Maybe you'll enjoy it, and we can all be friends again." Her eyes shot daggers at me. "This is disrespectful. I'll be calling the HOA again." I smiled, knowing exactly what she was about to do. "Go ahead, Karen. Call them. I've got the turkey cooking, the smell spreading throughout the whole neighborhood. And let's be honest, this is the kind of community event I think everyone can get behind. She huffed, her arms crossed tighter, but then she took a step back. She was out of ammunition. The more she tried to escalate things, the more I was determined to stand my ground. She glanced over her shoulder at the neighbors who were still watching, unsure of how to react. Karen clearly realized that the majority of them weren't as invested in her HOA war as she was. Without saying another word, she turned and stormed off, her face still red with fury. The small crowd behind her slowly began to disperse, murmuring to each other. Some looked reluctantly impressed by my move, while others seemed a little embarrassed to be caught in the middle of the tension. The whole situation was turning out to be more than just a barbecue. It had become a neighborhood event, and I knew Karen wasn't going to let this go anytime soon. I went back to tending the turkey, turning it ever so carefully. The smell continued to fill the air, and by now, I was starting to feel a little bad for anyone who had to live with that odor all day. But not for Karen. Not even a little bit. As the turkey finished cooking, I decided to do something that would really drive home the point. The next step was going to make Karen wish she had never crossed me in the first place. The turkey was done. Perfectly golden brown, tender, and dripping with flavor. It was the kind of thing you could tell people had been waiting all day for. As soon as the last of the meat had been carved, I knew I had to make a bold move. I wasn't just going to let this turkey sit and be admired. It needed to be shared. I picked up a large plate, stacked with juicy slices of turkey, and walked it directly to Karen's front yard. The house was silent now. Karen had gone inside, no doubt nursing her anger. But the neighbors were still watching, some of them unsure of what was about to happen. I walked right up to her front door and knocked. Moments later, her husband, Steve, opened it, clearly confused to see me standing there holding a plate of my finest work. "Mike," he asked, rubbing his eyes, "what is this?" I held up the plate, smiling. "Turkey. I figured I'd bring you guys a taste. I know Karen might have had a problem with the smell earlier, but I think this might change your mind." His eyes widened for a second, and then he looked past me, over to the massive barbecue still going strong in my yard. The smell was probably reaching the end of the block at this point. "I don't know what's going on, Mike," Steve said, trying not to laugh. "But Karen's going to blow a gasket when she sees this." I shrugged, smiling even wider. "Well, if she's got a problem with the food, tell her she's welcome to join us. I'm sharing with everyone." Steve seemed to hesitate, but then he took the plate from me, clearly too curious to turn down the offer. "I'll be sure to let her know." "Thanks, Mike," he said, nodding as he stepped back inside, the door closing behind him. As I turned to head back to my grill, I saw a few more neighbors sneaking glances from their windows. I waved to a couple of them. Karen had lost this round, and as much as I knew she would come back for more, I was ready. The turkey on her lawn was just the beginning. It didn't take long for the phone call to come. The HOA president, a man named Mr. Johnson, rang me up about 15 minutes later. I could hear the frustration in his voice as he began the conversation. "Mike, we've received complaints, again, about your barbecue. We understand you've taken matters into your own hands, but this kind of behavior is unacceptable." I couldn't help but smile to myself. "Mr. Johnson," I said, my voice oozing with politeness, "I'm just following through on what was requested. I'm sharing a meal with my neighbors, and we're all having a great time. I think it's exactly what the community needed." He let out a long sigh, but I could hear the uncertainty in his tone. "Look, Mike, I don't know what's going on over there, but Karen's really upset. She says you're trying to undermine her authority in the HOA." I chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure she's upset. But tell her this. If she ever has an issue with my barbecue again, she's more than welcome to join me. And bring a dish." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could tell he was at a loss for words. Finally, he spoke again, his voice less firm. "We'll have to look into this, Mike. But maybe keep the BBQs a little less obvious next time." I shrugged. "Sure thing, Mr. Johnson. But let's be honest, nothing says community like a turkey on the lawn." I hung up the phone with a grin, knowing this battle wasn't over yet. But for now, I had won. The turkey had been served, and Karen had been outdone. As the evening went on, the whole neighborhood seemed to be buzzing with activity. The turkey was gone in no time, and people were chatting, laughing, and even helping themselves to some of the side dishes I'd made. A few neighbors I'd never really talked to before came over to introduce themselves, offering praise for the barbecue and expressing their amusement at Karen's outburst. It was as if the whole block had just come together over a shared moment of rebellion. But of course, as the sun began to set and people started to head home, I knew Karen wouldn't just let this go. She was probably simmering inside her house, plotting her next move. I wasn't worried. This was the kind of thing she'd obsess over until she found a way to retaliate. But I had a feeling she was going to be more careful next time, which was exactly what I wanted. The next day, I was back at my grill, preparing for another weekend cookout. This time, though, it was more about enjoying the peace I'd earned than trying to send a message. I fired up the smoker and started prepping a few racks of ribs when I saw her, Karen, marching toward me across the yard, clipboard in hand, and an expression on her face that could only mean one thing. She was back for round two. As she stepped up to the fence, I glanced up from the grill. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mike," she said, her voice cold and stern, "I need to speak with you about what happened last weekend. This is becoming a habit." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Oh, come on, Karen. It was just a turkey. You can't honestly be upset about a little food." She stiffened. "It's not about the food. It's about your blatant disregard for the rules, the community, and the respect that this neighborhood demands. You need to understand that your actions have consequences." I leaned against the grill, wiping my hands. "Karen, I get it. You want things your way. But let me ask you something. After all the fuss last week, don't you think the whole neighborhood had a little fun? I've never seen people come together like that." She faltered for a second, clearly not expecting that response. "That's not the point," she snapped, but there was a pause in her voice. "What you did was unacceptable." I shrugged, turning back to the grill. "Maybe, but it worked. You've been quiet this whole week, haven't you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stood there, watching me grill. After a long silence, she sighed and turned to walk away. "We're not done with this, Mike." I just waved. "Sure thing, Karen. Let me know when you're ready for more turkey." The rest of the afternoon went by smoothly, and the tension between Karen and me seemed to evaporate. The neighborhood had gotten a taste of freedom, and Karen had gotten a taste of her own medicine. I knew she'd keep trying to enforce her petty little rules, but deep down, I felt like I had won. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been too afraid to speak up before. A few weeks passed, and things went back to normal. Well, normal for Oakwood Hills, at least. The HOA had stopped bothering me, and Karen, though still glaring at me every time we crossed paths, seemed to have lost her fire. The neighborhood was quieter now, but there was a sense of unity that hadn't been there before. People weren't afraid to challenge the system, to stand up for what was right. I kept grilling, of course, but now there was always a little crowd of curious neighbors hanging around, enjoying the smell of freshly cooked food and the sound of good conversation. It felt like a subtle rebellion, one that had changed the dynamic of the entire block. As for Karen, I could tell she was still plotting, still looking for ways to get me to follow her rules. But the truth was, the power had shifted. She wasn't the one in control anymore. And to be honest, I was kind of enjoying that feeling. That was when I decided to take things up another notch. After a couple of months of casual grilling, I planned my next move. I was going to host the neighborhood's first ever barbecue contest. Of course, I wasn't going to make it obvious that it was a way to turn the tables on Karen. It was going to be a fun, community-building event. I could already imagine her reaction when she saw flyers for the event, grilled food, prizes, and, of course, more delicious smells wafting through the air. But this time, I wasn't just grilling turkey or ribs. I was inviting everyone, from the most reluctant neighbor to the ones who had previously backed Karen's complaints. I was going to get the whole community involved. The contest went off without a hitch. People showed up with grills, smokers, and plenty of creativity. It was like a scene out of a food competition show, except everyone was laughing and sharing ideas instead of competing. Karen showed up late, of course, and as soon as she saw the smoke rising and the crowd gathered, she tried to scowl her way through the crowd. But when she caught a whiff of the pulled pork on the smoker, The expression on her face softened for just a second. Just a second, before the frown returned. I walked over to her with a plate of food in hand. "Karen," I said, offering her some pulled pork, "I saved you a plate." She took a long look at the food, then at me, and then finally, she just sighed. "Fine, but you better clean this mess up afterward." I grinned. "Of course. And just so you know, you're welcome to join the next barbecue contest. No complaints allowed." She looked at me, trying to maintain her usual grumpy composure, but I could see her fighting back a smile. "I'll think about it," she muttered. And with that, the tables had turned. What started as a simple barbecue became a victory, not just for me, but for everyone in Oakwood Hills. People were finally standing up for what they wanted, and Karen had no choice but to sit back and watch it unfold. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Trust me, the next chapter is going to be even bigger.